land had soured. Where once the hills rolled green and the wind carried the scent of pine and river stone, now the air hung heavy with ash and silence. Selene walked alone through the battlefield, her boots sinking into damp, blackened soil. The sky above was bruised with smoke, and the trees at the edge of the field bent unnaturally, as if recoiling from what had passed. She had come not to mourn, but to search. The war had crept too close to her village. The king's men spoke of foreign invaders, but the bodies strewn across the field told another story. Some were human, others were not. Twisted things with too many limbs and no eyes, their flesh glistening like wet stone. They did not bleed. They did not rot. They simply lay still, as if waiting. Selene did not look at them long. She kept her eyes low, her breath steady, and moved with purpose. She found him near the ridge, a soldier half buried in mud and blood, his armor cracked and scorched. His chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm. Around him, the creatures lingered, not attacking, not retreating, watching. Selene knelt beside him, her fingers trembling. She pressed 2 fingers to his throat. The pulse was faint. She whispered the words, old words, forbidden ones, the kind the village healer had taught her in secret before the veil cracked and the world turned against magic, the kind that made blood slow and bones knit, the kind that made people afraid. The air shimmered. The creatures hissed, a sound like rust peeling from iron, and vanished into the mist. She did not watch them go. Her eyes remained on the soldier. He awoke in her cottage hours later. The fire crackled softly. Rain tapped against the windows. Selene sat nearby, grinding herbs with practiced hands, her gaze flicking toward him as he stirred. "You're awake," she said, not looking up. He turned his head slowly, eyes meeting hers. They were gray, not cold, but distant. He did not speak. "You were dying," she continued. "I brought you here. You're safe." A long silence passed. Then finally, "You shouldn't have." She set the mortar down. "You would have died." "I was meant to," Selene frowned. "That's a strange thing to say." He looked away. Strange things happen in places like that. She stood and crossed the room, pouring water into a clay cup. "What happened out there? What are those creatures? What war is this?" He did not answer. She stepped closer. "You owe me something. A name, at least." He hesitated. "Kale. Just Kale. That's enough." She studied him. His wounds were healing faster than they should. The magic had worked too well. She had used it sparingly, carefully, ever since the veil cracked and the village turned against anything unnatural. But with him, she had not hesitated. "You're not a common soldier," she said. Kale's jaw tightened. "No, then why lie?" "I didn't lie. You didn't speak." He looked at her then, truly looked. "Because the truth is worse." Selene turned away, her hands trembling. She had stayed in the village when others fled. She had built a life from nothing, earned respect with her skill, carved out a place where she could belong. And now, This stranger, this man with secrets and shadows, had brought the war to her doorstep. "You'll leave in the morning," she said. Cale nodded. "Yes." She paused. "Will they come looking for you?" He did not answer. That night, Selene sat by the fire, watching him sleep. The rain had stopped. The wind had quieted. But something in the air still felt wrong. She watched the rise and fall of his chest, the way his fingers twitched in restless dreams. She had saved him, and something deep within, something quiet and uncertain, told her this was only the beginning. The morning broke gray and quiet. Selene stood in the garden behind her cottage, hands deep in the soil, coaxing life from the roots that had survived the ashfall. The lavender had browned at the edges, but the marigold still held its color. She whispered to them as she worked, not spells, just words. The kind that made things feel less alone. The village was still. Most of the homes were empty now, their doors unlatched, windows dark. A few had collapsed under the weight of neglect. The war had passed through like a fever, and the people had fled in its wake. Selene had stayed. She had always stayed. She was mending a broken fence when she heard the horses. 3 riders, cloaked in deep blue, crested the hill at a steady pace. Their armor caught the light, polished and ceremonial. Not scouts, not traitors, soldiers. Selene straightened slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. They stopped at the edge of the square, where the old well still stood. One dismounted, tall and broad-shouldered, his face unreadable beneath the helm. "Selene of Hollerreach?" he asked. She nodded. "I am. You are summoned." She didn't move. "By whom?" The soldier hesitated. "By the one who commands." Selene's jaw tightened. She had heard the rumors of the prince who ruled from the capital, of the king who no longer spoke, of the war that was not truly a war. But she had no interest in court politics. Her world was here, among herbs and ash and quiet things. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. The soldier stepped forward. "You are to come with us." Immediately. "Why?" "You healed a man who should have died." Selene's breath caught. "General Cale," he continued. "He carried something unnatural, and you survived it. That makes you valuable." She looked past him, toward the road that led away from the village. She had saved Cale. She had used magic she wasn't supposed to know. She had done it because no one else would. Because he had looked at her like he understood something she hadn't yet spoken aloud. And now he had vanished, and soldiers had come. They gave her an hour. She packed slowly, a satchel of herbs, a few vials of tincture, the old healer's journal wrapped in cloth. She stood in the doorway of her cottage, looking out at the village she had fought to protect. She felt something she hadn't felt in years. Fear, not for her life, for her place in the world. The road to the capital was long and silent. Selene did not speak. She watched the trees blur past, the sky darken, the land grow colder. And somewhere deep within, the veil stirred. The capital loomed ahead like a stone sentinel, carved from the bones of older kingdoms. Selene had never seen it before, but she had heard the stories of its towers that scraped the sky, of its walls that had never fallen, of its court where truth wore a mask and power spoke in whispers. The soldiers who escorted her said little. Their armor bore the sigil of the royal house, a silver flame over a broken circle. She did not ask what it meant. She had learned to listen in silence. The city gates opened without fanfare. Inside, the streets were wide and clean, lined with buildings of pale stone and shuttered windows. The people moved quickly, heads down, voices low. There was no music, no market noise, no laughter. Selene felt it immediately, the tension in the air, like a storm waiting to break. She passed a statue of the king, carved in marble, his eyes hollow with age. At his feet, offerings had been left, dried flowers, coins, folded prayers, but the statue was cracked, and no one knelt. They brought her through the castle's outer halls, past courtyards of silent fountains and gardens that had begun to wither. Guards stood at every archway, their faces unreadable. The castle was vast, but it did not feel alive. It felt like a tomb waiting for its occupant. At last, they led her into a chamber of stone and firelight, and there, waiting, was the prince. He stood by the hearth, dressed not in robes, but in a dark tunic, his hair tied back, his posture straight. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 30, but there was nothing soft in him. His eyes were sharp, his mouth set in a line that had forgotten how to smile. "Selene of Hollereach," he said. She nodded. "You summoned me." "I did." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please," she sat. He did not. "I've read the reports," he said. "You healed a man who should have died. General Kale." Selene's fingers tightened around her satchel. "I treated his wounds. With magic." She said nothing. The prince stepped closer. "You used power that should not exist. Power that was buried after the last breach." Selene looked up. "What breach?" He studied her. "You know of the veil," she nodded slowly. "Only what the old healer told me, that it was once opened, that it nearly destroyed us." The prince turned toward the fire. It was more than that. It was a gate, a vault between worlds, and it did not open on its own. Selene felt the air shift. "You think it's opening again," she said. "I know it is." He faced her. "The war we fight is not with foreign kingdoms. That was a lie, a necessary one. The truth is worse. Something is stirring beneath the veil, and Kale was sent to find those who could feel it." Selene's voice was quiet. "You mean me?" "Yes." She rose from her chair. "I want no part of this." The prince's expression did not change. "You already are part of it." Outside, the bells tolled once, low and distant. Selene stood in the silence, her heart pounding. She had come to heal, but the world was bleeding from a wound she could not yet see. The castle was vast, but it did not breathe. Selene wandered its corridors like a ghost, led by silent stewards and watched by guards who never blinked. The stone walls were carved with symbols she did not recognize, circles within circles, flames bound in chains. She passed courtyards where fountains no longer ran, and gardens where the flowers bloomed out of season, as if confused by the world around them. Her chamber was quiet, too quiet. She unpacked her satchel slowly, placing each vial and herb with care. The old healer's journal she kept beneath her pillow, though she had not opened it since arriving. She did not sleep well. The prince summoned her at dawn. She was led to the infirmary, a long hall lined with cots, most of them occupied. The wounded were silent. Their injuries were strange, burns that shimmered, eyes clouded with silver, skin that pulsed faintly, as if something beneath it stirred. Selene moved among them, her hands steady, her voice low. She did not ask what had caused their wounds. She already knew. Dorian watched her work. He did not speak at first, but when he did, his voice was quiet, almost reluctant. "You've done this before," he said. Selene did not look up. "I've had practice." "In Holloreach," she nodded. "Before the war reached us." He stepped closer. "You stayed when others fled." "I had nowhere else to go." They fell into a rhythm. He would summon her. She would heal. He would watch. Sometimes he asked questions about her methods, her herbs, her thoughts. Sometimes he said nothing at all, but he was never cruel, never impatient. And that unsettled her more than anger would have. One evening, as the sun dipped below the towers, Dorian joined her in the garden. She was tending to a patch of fever root, coaxing it back to life with warm water and whispered words. He stood nearby, watching the way her fingers moved. "You speak to them," he said. "They listen better than most." He smiled faintly. "Do they answer?" "Not in words." He crouched beside her. "What do they say?" She paused. "That they're tired, that they want to grow, but the ground is wrong." Dorian looked at the soil. "It's been poisoned, slowly, quietly, like everything else." They sat in silence. The garden was overgrown, the paths cracked, the air heavy with the scent of damp stone and old magic. Selene felt the weight of his gaze, but did not meet it. "You don't trust me," he said. "I don't know you. I've given you no reason to fear me. You summoned me against my will." He looked away. "Because I had no choice." She stood. "There's always a choice." Dorian rose with her. "Not when the vault begins to stir." Selene turned. "You speak of it like it's alive." "It is." He hesitated. "And so are you." The days in the castle passed like drifting snow, quiet, cold, and slow to melt. Selene spent her mornings in the infirmary, her afternoons in the garden, and her nights in silence. The wounded still came, though fewer now. Their injuries were stranger each time, veins that glowed faintly, skin that did not scar, eyes that saw things not present. She healed what she could. She did not ask questions. Prince Dorian came often, not with orders, but but with presence. He watched her work, asked about her methods, listened when she spoke. He never touched her, never raised his voice, but he was always near. One evening, he found her in the garden again. The fever root had bloomed pale gold, trembling in the wind. Selene knelt beside it, brushing soil from its leaves. "You coax life from ash," he said. She looked up. "It's stubborn, like me," he smiled. "I've noticed." They walked the garden paths together, past vines that grew too fast and flowers that bloomed out of season. The air was heavy with the scent of damp stone and old magic. Dorian paused beside a broken statue. A woman carved in flowing robes, her face worn smooth by time. "She was a healer," he said, "long ago, before the veil cracked." Selene touched the stone. What happened to her? She chose the wrong side. Selene's hand fell away. "And what side is right?" Dorian looked at her. "I haven't decided." That night, he brought her to the library. It was vast, shelves of leather-bound tomes, scrolls sealed in wax, maps drawn in ink that shimmered faintly. He showed her a book written in a language she did not know. The pages pulsed beneath her fingers. "It's older than the kingdom," he said. "Older than the vault." Selene frowned. "Why show me this?" "Because you're part of it now." They sat by the fire, the book open between them. Selene studied the symbols, the sketches, the fragments of prophecy. Dorian watched her, his expression unreadable. "You're not what I expected," he said. She looked up. "What did you expect? A weapon or a threat?" And now he hesitated. "Now I'm not sure." The silence between them grew heavier. Not cold, not cruel, just full. Selene felt something shift, not in him, but in herself. A quiet ache, a question she could not name. She rose to leave. Dorian stood with her. "Selene," he said. She turned. "If I asked you to stay," he said, "not as a healer, not as a tool, just stay, would you?" She did not answer. She left the library with the ache still blooming in her chest. Cale returned the next morning. He did not knock. He stood in her chamber doorway, pale and silent, his eyes darker than she remembered. "You're stronger," he said. She did not speak. "I had to bring you here," he said. "You know that." She stepped past him. "I don't know anything anymore." The castle had wings that no map showed. Selene discovered this not through curiosity, but through silence, the kind that settles when footsteps vanish and doors close without sound. She had begun to notice patterns. Guards who never rotated, corridors that bent too sharply, shadows that lingered longer than they should. One evening, after tending to a soldier whose veins pulsed with silver light, she wandered past the eastern hall and found a door she had never seen before. It was plain, unmarked, and locked, but the stone around it was warm. She did not touch it, not yet. Dorian found her in the library that night. He carried no books, no scrolls, just a quiet expression and a bottle of dark wine. "You look tired," he said. "I am." He poured 2 cups and handed her one. "You've done more than most." Selene took it, but did not drink. "You've seen more than most." He smiled faintly. "That's not the same." They sat by the fire, the silence between them no longer sharp, but soft. "I used to think healing was simple," she said. "You find the wound, you mend it, you move on. And now I think some wounds don't want to close." Dorian looked into the flames. "Some wounds are gates." She turned to him. "Is that what the vault is? A wound?" He didn't answer. Later, as the fire dimmed, he spoke again. "My father believed the veil was sacred, that it kept us safe, but he also believed it was a lie." Selene frowned. "How can it be both?" "Because it was built by men who feared what they couldn't control." He paused. "And now it's cracking." She watched him closely. There was something in his voice, not fear, but weariness. The kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. "You don't want to use me," she said. "No, but you will." He met her gaze. "Yes." The next morning, Cale found her in the garden. He looked thinner, paler. His eyes held shadows she hadn't seen before. "You found the door," he said. She didn't deny it. "It leads to the vault's edge," he continued. "To the ones they keep hidden." Selene's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Cale stepped closer. "You're not the only one who can touch the veil." That night, she returned to the eastern hall. The door was still warm, and this time it opened. The eastern wing was colder than the rest of the castle. Selene stepped through the unmarked door Cale had spoken of, her fingers trailing along the stone as she descended. The air thickened with each step, heavy with dust, and something older, not rot, not damp, but memory. The torches flickered with blue flame, casting long shadows that moved too slowly. She had expected cells. She found chambers. The first held a woman with silver eyes and no voice. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her hands glowing faintly, her mouth stitched shut with threads of light. She looked at Selene and bowed her head, as if in apology. The second held a boy no older than 10. He slept beneath a blanket of runes, his breath shallow, his dreams visible, flickering images of fire and flight and falling stars. The third was empty. Its walls were cracked. Its chains were broken. Selene moved through the wing in silence, her heart pounding. These were not criminals. They were remnants, people like her. She found Cale waiting at the end of the hall. He leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, his eyes shadowed. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said. Selene stepped past him. "But you showed me." "I had to," she turned. "Why?" Cale hesitated. "Because you're not like them, and because he's not what you think." She returned to her chamber that night and found Dorian waiting. He stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the stars. "You went below," he said. "I did," he turned. "And what did you see?" "Prisoners," he nodded. "Survivors." Selene stepped closer. "Why are they locked away?" "Because the world fears what it cannot bind. She studied him. There was no anger in his voice, no shame, only weariness. "You didn't put me there," she said. "No." "Why?" He hesitated. "Because you can heal, and because we need you." The words hung between them, not cruel, not kind, just true. Selene looked away. "That's not the same as trust." "No," Dorian said. "It is." They sat by the fire, the silence between them thick with things unsaid. He did not speak for a long time. Then, quietly, "If I could choose a world without vaults, without veils, without chains and secrets, I would." Selene looked at him. He did not meet her gaze. Later, as she lay in bed, Selene opened the old healer's journal for the first time since arriving. The ink had faded, but the words remained. "The veil does not open. It is pulled." The castle had grown quieter, not with peace, but with preparation. The rhythm of the halls had changed, fewer footsteps, fewer voices, more locked doors. Selene noticed it first in the infirmary. Fewer wounded, more watchers. The prince no longer lingered. He summoned her, spoke briefly, then vanished into the deeper wings. Something was beginning, and she was no longer certain she would be part of it. One morning, she found the garden sealed. The iron gate was locked, the vines trimmed back, the soil overturned. The fever root she had coaxed into bloom was gone, uprooted, burned. She stood at the gate for a long time, her fingers curled around the bars. She did not cry, but something inside her folded. That evening, Dorian summoned her to the high chamber. It was a room she had never entered, circular, domed, carved with symbols that pulsed faintly in the torchlight. A table stood at the center, covered in scrolls and maps. Around it, 5 men in robes murmured in low voices. Dorian dismissed them with a glance. He waited until the door closed. Then he spoke. "The veil is thinning." Selene said nothing. "The vault stirs. We've begun the binding." She stepped forward. "What does that mean?" "It means we must seal it again before it opens fully." She studied him. His face was drawn, his voice steady, but his hands trembled. "You need me," she said. He nodded. "Your gift slows the pull. It holds the wounded in place. Without it, the binding fails. And when it's done," he looked away, "then you'll be reassigned." She turned to leave. He did not stop her. But as she reached the door, he spoke again. "There was a time I thought this place could be different, that we could build something better than what came before." Selene paused. He did not meet her gaze. Kale found her in the corridor. He said nothing at first, just walked beside her. Then, quietly, "They'll lock you away when it's done." Selene didn't look at him. "I know. I can get you out." She stopped. "Why?" Kale's voice was low. "Because you saved me, and because I've seen what they do to the ones they no longer need." That night, Selene returned to her chamber and found the journal missing. In its place was a single page, folded, blank. But when she touched it, the ink bloomed. The veil does not open. It is pulled, and it remembers who pulled first. castle had begun to close in. Selene felt it in the air. Tighter patrols, locked doors, whispers that stopped when she entered a room. Her summons to the infirmary had ceased. The stewards no longer met her eyes. Even the garden, once her quiet refuge, had been razed and salted. She was no longer a guest. She was a threat. Cale came to her chamber at dusk. He carried no weapons, only a folded cloak and a map drawn in charcoal. "They've begun the binding," he said. "I know. They'll use you. Then they'll silence you." Selene's voice was quiet. "I'm not afraid." Cale looked at her, and something flickered in his eyes. "Guilt. You need to leave," he said. "Now." They moved through the lower halls in silence. Cale led her past the kitchens, the old archives, the sealed stairwells. The map was crude, but the path was clear. A servant's passage that led beneath the eastern wing toward the vault's edge. Selene followed without question, but something in her chest felt wrong. Not fear, design. The passage ended at a door carved in obsidian. Cale placed his hand against it. The runes flared. "It's here," he said. "What is?" Cale hesitated. "I can't explain. You have to touch it." Selene stepped back. "Why? I don't know. I was told to bring you. That this was the only way." The door opened. Inside was a chamber of silence. No torches, no guards, just a single pedestal and the orb that rested atop it. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. The air shimmered around it. Selene stepped forward, uncertain. Footsteps echoed behind them. Guards closing in. Cale turned to her, desperate. "Selene, now. You have to trust me." She hesitated. The orb pulsed. The guards shouted. Cale grabbed her arm. "Touch it, please." She reached out. Her fingers met the surface. The world cracked, not with sound, with memory. She saw fire, chains, a voice calling her name from beneath the earth. She felt her blood stir, her bones shift, her breath catch in her throat. The seal within her, the one she hadn't known existed, broke. She fell to her knees. The orb dimmed. The guards surrounded her. Cale stepped back. Selene tried to rise, but her limbs trembled. The magic inside her was awake now, raw, unshaped, burning. Dorian entered last. He looked at her, not with triumph, not with cruelty, with confusion. They chained her in silence. Iron cuffs etched with runes, a collar of silver, a chamber carved from stone. She did not scream. She did not beg. She looked at Dorian as they locked the door, and he looked back, not knowing what she had become. The stone walls did not speak, but Selene could feel them listening. The chamber was quiet, not with peace, with pressure. The runes etched into the stone pulsed faintly, trying to suppress what had awakened inside her. The iron cuffs burned cold, but they no longer dulled her entirely. Something had changed. The seal was broken. Her blood hummed with power she did not yet understand. She was chained, but she was not quiet. Selene began to test the runes, not with force, with rhythm. She whispered old chants beneath her breath, traced patterns in the dust, remembered the way the orb had pulsed beneath her fingers. The magic inside her was raw, unshaped, but it was hers now, and it was growing. The guards did not speak. They watched her like she was a storm waiting to break. Dorian came on the third night. He entered without armor, without guards, just silence. Selene did not rise. He stood by the door, watching her. Then, finally, "You're different." She looked up. "You made me different." He didn't answer. She stood slowly, the chains clinking against the stone. "You planned this," she said. "You used Cale." Dorian's brow furrowed. "Cale. He led me to the orb. He told me to touch it. He said it was my only chance." Dorian stepped forward. "He was supposed to keep you safe." "Not," Selene's voice cut through. "He was following orders." "Whose?" Dorian's silence was sharp. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear it." He moved to the wall, placing a hand against the runes. "They're weakening," he murmured. Selene watched him. "You didn't expect that." "No, you thought I was just a healer." Dorian turned. "I thought you were useful. And now," he hesitated, "now I think you're necessary." He stepped closer, voice low. "The veil is thinning faster than we predicted. The binding won't hold without a tether. Not a tool, a source." Selene's breath caught. "You mean me?" Dorian nodded. "You're not just part of the ritual. You are the ritual." She looked at him, truly looked. At the man who had chained her. At the man who now needed her more than he feared her. "You didn't want this," she said. "No, but you'll do it. I have no choice." The silence between them was heavy, not with rage, with inevitability. Selene turned away, and Dorian left. That night, the runes pulsed brighter, and somewhere deep below, the veil stirred. The silence had teeth. Selene felt it in the way the guards no longer lingered outside her door, in the way the torchlight flickered unevenly, in the way the stone beneath her feet pulsed with something ancient. Cale had not returned. Dorian had not spoken. The castle was holding its breath. She was no longer just a prisoner. She was becoming something else. She traced the runes again, not to break them, to understand them. They were old, older than the vault, older than the castle. They weren't meant to suppress her. They were meant to contain something far worse. And now they were failing. Her magic had begun to reshape itself, not wild, not chaotic, focused. She dreamed of fire, not destruction, memory. A man with silver eyes, a voice like thunder, a hand pressed to her forehead as a child whispering words she hadn't understood until now. You are the thread. You are the seal. You are the blood that remembers. She woke with the words burning in her chest. She pressed her palm to the wall. The runes flared, but they did not resist. They bent, just slightly, just enough. She whispered Cale's name, not in anger, in mourning. She did not know what had happened to him, but she knew he had not lied. He had been sent, and she had been chosen. The veil stirred beneath her, not distant, not abstract, close, hungry, waiting. She stood. The chains strained, the cuffs burned, but her breath was steady. She was not ready, but she was no longer afraid. The chamber had begun to breathe. Selene felt it in the stone, a slow, rhythmic pulse beneath her feet, like the heartbeat of something buried too long. The runes etched into the walls flickered now, no longer suppressing her magic, but reacting to it. The cuffs around her wrists burned hotter, but she no longer feared the pain. She welcomed it. Kale had not returned. She whispered his name once, just to see if the walls would answer. They didn't, but the silence felt heavier. She didn't know what they'd done to him. She didn't need to. She pressed her palm to the wall. The runes flared. She whispered the rhythm again, the one that came in dreams, in memory, in blood. You are the thread. You are the seal. You are the blood that remembers. The wall pulsed and cracked, just slightly, just enough. She sat again, cross-legged, calm. She placed her hands on the floor and whispered, not to escape, to awaken. The door opened. She didn't turn. She didn't flinch. She knew it was him. Dorian stepped inside, slower than before. His cloak was damp. His eyes were tired. But there was something else, something quieter. Hesitation. He looked at her. She looked back. You've changed, he said. Selene didn't answer. He stepped closer. The runes are failing. Still silence. He moved to the wall, placed his hand against the stone. It pulsed beneath his fingers. He turned to her. What are you doing? Selene's voice was quiet, becoming. Dorian's face shifted, not with anger, with fear. He stepped back. You need to stop. Selene stepped forward. I can't. The silence between them was sharp, not with rage, with reckoning. Dorian looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time, he didn't see a healer. He saw the seal. The stone cracked. Not loudly, not yet, but Selene felt it. A tremor beneath her feet, a shift in the runes. The chamber was no longer holding her. It was resisting her, and it was losing. She stood. The cuffs burned. The air shimmered. The veil pulsed. She pressed her palm to the wall. The runes flared, then flickered, then dimmed. She whispered the rhythm again. You are the thread. You are the seal. You are the blood that remembers. The wall split. A thin fracture. A breath of freedom. The torchlight flickered violently. The chains strained. The veil stirred, not gently, not patiently. It roared inside her, around her, through her. The door slammed open. Dorian. He stepped inside, eyes wide, cloak trailing behind him like a shadow. He saw the wall. He saw the crack. He saw her. What have you done? He said. Selene didn't answer. She stepped forward. The cuffs glowed. The runes on the floor pulsed in warning. But she didn't stop. Dorian raised a hand, not in threat, in fear. You're breaking the seal. Selene's voice was quiet. No, I am the seal. The chamber shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The fracture widened. The veil lashed out, a gust of wind, a flicker of light, a whisper that wasn't a whisper. Dorian staggered back. Selene stood still. She looked at him, not with anger, not with grief, with clarity. "You wanted to use me," she said. "I didn't know what you were. You still don't." The chains snapped. The cuffs shattered. The runes went dark, and Selene stepped through the fracture. She did not run. She did not hide. She walked, and the veil followed. Screams echoed through the stone corridors. Not from her, from them. Guards scrambled outside the chamber, shouting orders that no one followed. Footsteps pounded in every direction. Someone dropped a sword. Someone else ran. Selene didn't move. She stood in the center of the room, breathing slowly, watching the dust settle. The magic around her was thick now, not wild, but heavy. It clung to the walls, pressed against the ceiling, hummed beneath the floor. The veil was awake, and it was loud. She stepped forward. The chains fell away. The door was still open. She walked into the hall. A steward saw her and screamed. 2 guards backed away, weapons raised, but hands shaking. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The castle was unraveling. Not physically, not yet, but in fear. The people inside had felt safe, in control. Now they didn't know what she was, and she wasn't sure either. But she knew she wasn't done. She moved through the corridors, searching. Not for escape, for Cale. He had led her to the orb. He had vanished, and she needed to know why. She passed the throne room, empty. She passed the war chamber, abandoned. She passed Dorian's quarters. The door was open. The room was torn apart. No sign of him. No sign of Cale, just echoes. And the veil, pulsing louder now, like it was trying to guide her. She kept walking. She was still a prisoner, but not in chains. Not anymore. The castle wasn't quiet anymore. Screams echoed through the upper halls. Orders were shouted, ignored, repeated. Metal clanged against stone. Selene moved through it all like smoke, not unseen, but untouched. No one dared stop her. She was still a prisoner, but no one knew how to hold her now. She kept her head down, not to hide, to focus. Her magic was pulsing, unpredictable. The cuffs were gone, but the pressure hadn't lifted. It had shifted. The veil was pressing against her skin, against her thoughts. It wanted something. It was waiting. She didn't care. She wanted answers. Cale had vanished. No one spoke his name. No one admitted he'd been taken. But Selene knew where to look. She reached the lower wing. The guards had abandoned it. The air was colder here, not from temperature, but from memory. The walls were thicker. The silence was heavier. This was where they kept secrets. She found the door. Iron reinforced, marked with runes. She placed her hand against it. The runes flared, then cracked, then died. Inside, a corridor carved from stone. Dim torches, empty cells, a smear of blood on the floor. She walked slowly. No footsteps behind her. No voices ahead. Just the veil humming louder now. She found the room, the chair in the center, the restraints, the scorch marks, and on the wall, scratched into the stone, a symbol. One she'd seen before, on the orb. She stepped closer. Her breath slowed. Her magic surged. Cale had been here, and he'd left something behind. The room was colder than the rest of the wing. Selene stepped inside slowly, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The torches burned low. The walls were thick. The air smelled of iron and ash. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. This was where they'd brought him. The chair sat in the center of the room, heavy, bolted to the floor. Leather restraints still buckled. Burn marks on the stone. A smear of dried blood near the base. She didn't flinch. She'd seen worse, but not to him. She moved closer. There were scratches on the wall, not random, not desperate, intentional. A symbol carved deep into the stone. Familiar. She'd seen it on the orb. She'd seen it in her dreams. She reached out, tracing the lines with her fingers. Her magic pulsed in response, not violently, but with recognition. The veil stirred. The symbol meant something, a message, a memory. Cale had left it for her. She stepped back. There was no note, no voice, just the mark. But it was enough. He hadn't vanished. He'd been silenced, and he'd tried to speak anyway. She turned toward the door. The castle was still in chaos. Dorian was still missing. The veil was still pressing against her thoughts. But now she had a direction. She wasn't done. She was just beginning. The symbol was carved deep. Selene ran her fingers over the grooves again, slower this time. It wasn't just a mark. It was a direction, a message, a memory. She didn't know what it meant yet, but her magic reacted to it. The veil pulsed every time she touched it. Cale had left it for her, not to comfort her, to guide her. She stepped back and scanned the room. The walls were thick. The floor was uneven. The torchlight flickered against old stone. She noticed a seam in the corner, subtle, but there. A break in the pattern. A door, maybe. Or a passage. She pressed her hand to it. Nothing happened. She whispered the rhythm. The stone shifted. A narrow stairwell revealed itself. Descending, dark. She didn't hesitate. The air grew colder as she moved down. Not from temperature, from pressure. The veil was stronger here. Closer. Her magic pressed against her skin, her breath, her thoughts. It wasn't painful. It was constant. She kept going. At the bottom, a small chamber. No torches. No guards, just a table. A book. And a second symbol etched into the floor. She stepped inside. The book was old, bound in leather, no title. She opened it. The pages were filled with diagrams, runes, names. One of them was hers. Another was Cale's. And another, one she didn't recognize. But she knew it, her father. She sat down. She didn't speak. She read. And the veil pulsed louder. The book was heavier than it looked. Selene opened it slowly, careful not to tear the brittle pages. The ink had faded in places, but the diagrams were clear. Runes, seals, bloodlines. She didn't recognize most of it, but some of it felt familiar. Not from memory, from instinct. Her name appeared halfway through, not written plainly, encoded in a diagram, marked with a symbol she'd seen on the orb. She traced it with her finger. Her magic pulsed in response. The veil stirred. She turned the page. Cale's name was there too, not as a soldier, as a courier, a guide, a trigger. She kept reading. The third name stopped her. No title, no rank, just a symbol beside it, the same one Cale had carved into the wall. She didn't know the name, but she knew what it meant. Her father. She sat back. The room was silent. The veil pressed harder now, like it was trying to pull her deeper. Her magic responded, but she kept it contained. She needed clarity, not chaos. Cale hadn't betrayed her. He'd been following orders. Her father's, and she was the result. She closed the book. She didn't feel angry. She felt awake. Selene didn't linger in the chamber. She had the book. She had the symbol. She had a direction. The second vault. She moved quickly through the lower wing. The castle was still unraveling, guards shouting, doors slamming, footsteps echoing in every direction. No one tried to stop her. Most didn't even look at her. She wasn't invisible. She was untouchable. The map in the book was crude but clear. The vault wasn't beneath the castle. It was beneath the old garden. A place no one used anymore. Overgrown. Sealed off. She remembered it. Cale had taken her there once. Said it was quiet. Now she knew why. She reached the garden gate. Locked. She pressed her hand to the rusted iron. Her magic surged. The lock snapped. Inside, vines, stone, silence. She followed the path to the far wall, the one with no windows, no doors. She opened the book again. The symbol matched. She pressed her palm to the stone. The wall trembled, then split. A stairwell descended into darkness. No torches, no guards, just cold air and the sound of her own breath. She stepped inside. This time, she wasn't searching. She was ready to find. The vault wasn't hidden anymore. Selene stepped into the chamber, the veil roaring behind her like a tide, breaking through stone. The walls pulsed with ancient runes, and the air shimmered with power older than the kingdom itself. At the center, Cale lay slumped against the base of the gate. She ran to him. His body was broken, burned, cut, starved, but his eyes still held fire. "You came," he whispered. "You left the signs," she said. "I had to," Cale replied. "You needed to see this." He reached into his cloak and pulled out a seal obsidian, etched with the mark of the high ranks. "This is your inheritance," he said. "Your father built this vault not to contain the veil, but to release it. Through you." Selene stared at the gate. "I was made for this," Cale nodded. "Not to serve, to rule." He coughed, blood on his lips. They're waiting, Selene. Beyond the veil, the high ranks, the old ones, they'll come through you. Not as monsters, as gods. They'll inhabit the bodies of the living, rewrite the world. She looked down. The same world that raised her, the same people who feared her. You could lead them, Kale said. Shape the new order. No more war. No more hunger. Just silence, obedience. Selene stood. The gate pulsed. Her magic surged. She felt it, the pull of power, the promise of control. And she hated that part of her wanted it. Stone cracked behind her. She turned. Dorian stood in the archway. He didn't speak at first. His cloak was torn. His face was pale. His hands were empty. He looked at Kale, then at her, then at the gate. I saw the sky split, he said quietly. The city's burning. The veil's bleeding through. He paused. And you're the only one left. Selene didn't answer. She stepped toward the gate. Dorian watched her. Then he spoke again, softer. I don't know what you'll choose, he said. He looked down. But I think you already have. She didn't turn. She didn't speak. She placed her hand on the seal, and the gate began to open. The vault trembled. Stone groaned beneath Selene's feet as the veil surged through the cracks in the world. The chamber pulsed with ancient power, the runes flaring in rhythm with her breath. The gate stood open, not broken, not breached, but waiting. Kale knelt behind her, bloodied and breathless. They will come, he said. The high ranks, the old ones, they will rise through you. Selene didn't answer. Her hand hovered above the seal. Dorian stood in the archway. He had not spoken since he arrived. His cloak was torn. His face was pale. His hands were empty. He looked at Kale, then at her, then at the gate. I saw the sky split, he said quietly. The city's burning. The veil's bleeding through. He paused. And you're the only one left. Selene didn't turn. She stepped closer to the gate. Her magic surged. The runes ignited. The vault began to stir. Kale rose, staggering. You were made to rule, he said. This world is broken. Let it be rewritten. Dorian stepped forward slowly. You don't owe them anything, he said. But you lived among them. You bled with them. You were one of them. Selene's hand remained on the seal. The light grew brighter. The veil roared. She closed her eyes. She saw the rewritten world, clean, silent, obedient. She saw the broken one, loud, flawed, real. She saw her father's design. She saw her own reflection. Then she turned to Dorian. He hadn't moved. She stepped close, just enough for her voice to reach him. And she said, You asked me once what happened to the healer. Dorian's breath caught. Selene looked at the gate. She chose the wrong side. She met his gaze. I won't. Dorian didn't speak, but his expression shifted slowly, like dawn breaking through ash. His shoulders lowered, his jaw unclenched, and his eyes, rimmed with exhaustion, filled with quiet understanding. He gave her a smile, faint, sad, grateful, and then, voice low, almost to himself, I know, I guess I always knew. Regret settled in his chest like stone, not for her choice, but for not seeing it sooner, for not believing she would choose the world he thought was already lost, and for knowing she wouldn't survive it. Selene turned back to the seal, placed her hand upon it, and chose. The vault collapsed in silence. No scream, no final cry, just light, blinding, blue, and absolute. The veil recoiled, torn from the world like breath from a dying lung. The runes shattered, the gate cracked, and Selene, standing at its heart, was consumed, not by violence, by choice. Cale watched her as the light took her. His body failed, but his eyes did not. He saw her face, calm, resolute, unafraid, and he smiled, softly, sadly. Then he closed his eyes and let the silence take him. When the dust settled, the vault was gone. The gate was sealed, and where Selene had stood, a single flame burned, blue, still, alive. Dorian knelt beside it. He did not speak. He did not weep. But his hands trembled as he cupped the flame. It did not scorch him. It did not speak. But it pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. He carried it back to the castle. Through the ruins, through the ash, through the silence. In the highest chamber, he placed it in a glass vessel. No guards, no ceremony, just stone and shadow. And every night he returned, to watch it burn, to make sure it never went out. He never spoke of her again. But when asked why the flame burned blue, he would pause and say, almost without looking, that's how she was. Cold, but always burning, keeping you warm. Then he'd turn away, as if the answer had always been there, in the silence, in the ash, in the way the flame never went out.